So, after a quick trip to the back, Al came out with the keys to the hauler, handing them over to me. "Now don't you go crashing that thing. Any damage is coming out of your ass. Got me?" Al said, as he placed the keys into my hand. "Trust me, if that thing stops working, your paycheck, well, it's gonna go from light to non-existent." "Oh, relax, old man," I replied. "I mean, seriously, I've driven it 100 times and I've never so much as put a scratch on it. Relax." So with that, me and Emily headed out back towards the hauler. Al's hauler wasn't the best thing that you'd ever see. It was far from top of the line, but it was functional. After all, Al was a mechanic, so he always made sure it was in working condition. And as it was an older model, parts weren't too hard to come by. The parts themselves might need a little bit of work before they're installed, but a quick cleanup and most older parts will do just fine. The hauler itself was a very large automobile, running an old-school electric engine. Like most haulers, this one was set up for hover, meaning it didn't have wheels or anything like that. It was carried aloft by hover panels. Basically, panels that project a field of energy below the automobile itself, and a system of magnetic locks, so to speak. Something that kept the field of energy contained underneath the vehicle, so that it would stay afloat. And the energy wouldn't just escape out into nowhere. It would just bounce back and forth between the ground and the vehicle. It wasn't a good style of movement for anything that you wanted to particularly move fast. But in terms of stability and being able to bypass difficult terrain, you really couldn't get better than a hover vehicle. Al's busted old hover vehicle was a fairly typical appearance for things within the orange or yellow districts. Old, rusted, beat to hell, but working all the same. There was a sizable cabin up front for a few people to be inside of it, and a large, heavy steel-plated back section that went up about 10 feet off the ground, maybe 12. There was, of course, an automatic back door that would open to the hauler section of the vehicle, along with some magnetic and direct couplings. The magnetic ones work as you'd expect. They attach to anything magnetic, lock into place, and then the winch pulls it back into the hauler so it can be towed away safely. The direct couplings are basically just big hooks that you can snag onto anything. And once again, the winch just pulls it back. It's for things that aren't quite magnetic, or might be sensitive to magnets. You don't want to damage the goods. So, me and Emily hopped in, me taking the driver's seat of course, and Emily hopping in the passenger side. As I turned the key and the electric engine kicked on, making a deep humming sound as the vehicle slowly began to lift off the ground. Once again, these weren't made for speed. It took about a minute or so before the vehicle was lifted enough to start moving. Try to move too quickly and you'll end up damaging the vehicle. It has to be a safe distance away from the ground in order to maintain it. But eventually we picked up and I left, driving towards the Red District and those oh so familiar endless dunes of scrap metal and garbage. It definitely wasn't a safe place, especially considering that there were quite a few large-scale scrap gangs that tended to call the Red District home. It was a little bit more tame inside of the Yellow District as you're closer to the inner walls, and society, which tends to have much more stringent rules when it comes to murdering people willy-nilly. You pull out a gun and start shooting somewhere in a populated area, and people are bound to shoot back, regardless of who you are. But since there weren't many civilized people out in the Red District, people could really just do what they want. No rules. And not to mention that the Red District was also basically a dump. Not just figuratively, but literally. The Yellow District, along with the upper districts that you'd reach as you move towards the center of Newgate City, all use the Red District as a dumping ground. A massive waste heap where nothing that's of any value to them goes. It's where all garbage goes. No questions asked, no rules, no restrictions, no cost. You want to get rid of it? Dump it in the Red District. Easy as that. I heard back in the old world that there were a lot of people who were concerned with environmentalism, which is trying to protect the state of the world, the planet. Make sure it stays nice and habitable for the rest of us. But the Third Great War put all that to rest. We basically bombed ourselves into an endless desert. Most forest and populated areas within developed societies were pretty much burnt to a crisp, along with basically everything. Farmland, homes, cities, everything got bombed to hell in every direction, everywhere. Luckily enough for us, we had long since gotten rid of nuclear weapons at that point in time. So our world didn't become a nuclear irradiated wasteland. But you can't replace a superweapon with anything but a superweapon. So, like everything else, nukes got an upgrade. A new category of superweapon. We've long since forgotten the technical name for what they were called back in the day. But in this day and age, we call them nitro bombs. When it comes to how they worked, your guess is as good as mine. But as far as the effects go, they were devastating. Each one somehow triggered a chain reaction effect, lighting the air itself on fire, in an ever-expanding chain reaction that extended for hundreds of miles in every direction. If it wasn't made of stone or steel, it was burnt to a crisp, almost immediately. Countries began stockpiling them, just like they did with nukes, except these didn't have the fallout repercussions. No radioactive contamination to mutate generations of people. Just good old-fashioned death and destruction on a mass scale, with no nasty after effects. So if you want to stroll a troop right in after you drop one, it's completely safe to do so long as you're fine with stepping over the ashes of everyone who was there before you. And that, my friends, is why our world is basically a freaking desert. Don't get me wrong, some things have started to grow back. Small segments of the larger forested areas have begun to recover somewhat. But a lot of the more city areas where there wasn't as much vegetation haven't recovered so quickly. Apparently, those bombs didn't just burn up the air, they also left a heavy salt residue in the process of the explosion. Why? I don't know. But basically, it salted the earth. So getting anything to grow in salt-rich soil is a hard task, and trying to remove it all is next to impossible. But I suppose I'm getting diverted. Right now, my main objective is just to get this hauler to the Red District. That XPC is waiting for me. I can almost hear it calling me. I'm here, Jax. Come to me. As silly as that sounds. But I can't deny that I was actually looking forward to ripping that thing apart. I mean, seriously, the insight that I could gain on design just from being able to take it apart, study the way it works, it could definitely give me some new directions for my bike. And that is something I definitely am looking forward to. If I intend to enter the Black Label races with it, I'm gonna need every edge I can get.